Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW Super Brawl 1994. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is Johnny B. Bad versus Michael P.S. Hayes. To start off the match, we have Michael P.S. Hayes coming down to the ring in a wheelchair with the help from Jimmy Garvin. Commissioner Bockwinkel says that Garvin will have to take the place of Michael P.S. Hayes against Johnny B. Bad. If not, they will both be suspended. And the match between Johnny B. Bad and Johnny B. Bad and Jimmy Garvin will take place later on in the night. Moving on from that, we go into our second match of the night, or our first match, if you will. It is a tag team matchup. It is Thunder and Lightning versus Harlem Heat. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Thunder and Lightning and Harlem Heat, with Harlem Heat keeping the pace of the match. Stevie Ray ultimately hits a big boot, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Harlem Heat. Hats off to Harlem Heat for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Equalizer versus Jim Steele. I thought this was an awful match. Back and forth matchup between the Equalizer and Jim Steele, with the Equalizer keeping the pace of the match. Equalizer hits a big leg drop on Jim Steele in the middle of the ring, but Jim Steele ultimately hits a Lou Thesz press on the Equalizer, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jim Steele. Hats off to Jim Steele for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Diamond Dallas Page versus Terry Taylor. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Page and Taylor, with Taylor keeping the pace of the match. Taylor ultimately hits a roll-up on Diamond Dallas Page, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Terry Taylor. Hats off to Terry Taylor for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Johnny B. Bad versus Jimmy Garvin. I thought this was a good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between Johnny B. Bad and Jimmy Garvin, with Johnny B. Bad keeping the pace of the match. Johnny B. Bad hits a head scissors on Jimmy Garvin in the middle of the ring, and then Johnny B. Bad ultimately hits his signature sunset flip into a roll-up on Garvin, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Johnny B. Bad. Hats off to Johnny B. Bad for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Television Championship. It is Arn Anderson versus Steven Regal. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Anderson and Regal, with Anderson keeping the pace of the match. Regal then lands a devastating European uppercut on Arn Anderson. Sir William then attacks Arn Anderson ringside. Regal and Arn both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Arn hitting a spine buster on Regal in the middle of the ring. Regal then goes for a cover with the help of Sir William, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time still WCW Television Champion, is Steven Regal. Hats off to Steven Regal for getting the win in that match, and at that time retaining the WCW Television Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Tag Team Championships. It is the Nasty Boys versus Max Payne and Cactus Jack. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Cactus Jack and Max Payne keeping the pace of the match. Cactus Jack then hits a DDT on both of the Nasty Boys in the middle of the ring. Payne then applies a painkiller on Brian Knobbs. Sags then hits Max Payne with a guitar. Referee ends up seeing this. Referee sounds for the bell. And your winners of the match by disqualification are Max Payne and Cactus Jack. Hats off to Max Payne and Cactus Jack for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Thunder Cage matchup. It is Rick Rude, Steve Austin, and Paul Orndorff versus Dustin Rhodes, Sting, and Brian Pillman. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Dustin Rhodes, Sting, and Brian Pillman keeping the pace of the match. Sting ultimately hits a press slam on Pillman, sending Pillman into Austin. Pillman goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Dustin Rhodes, Sting, and Brian Pillman. Hats off to Dustin Rhodes, Sting, and Brian Pillman for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of SuperBrawl 1994. It is Ric Flair versus Vader for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship with special guest referee, The Boss. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Flair and Vader, with Flair landing devastating chops on Vader. Flair then hits Vader with a chair shot. Harley then attacks Flair out on the outside. Vader then unloads devastating strikes on Flair in the middle of the ring. Vader then hits a devastating superplex on Flair off the top rope. Vader then attacks the Boss. Harley then enters the cage. Vader then lands a splash on Flair in the middle of the ring. Arn Anderson is here, as well as Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. They are trying to enter the Thunder cage. Unfortunately, they were not successful. Flair then hits Harley and Vader. The Boss breaks free from him being handcuffed by Vader and Harley Race. Flair then quickly applies a figure four leg lock on Vader. Vader ends up tapping out, and your winner of the match is Ric Flair. Couple of things I'm going to say about SuperBrawl 1994 before I get out of here, man. Number one, this was a decent event. It wasn't the greatest, but it damn sure was not the worst. But there's a couple matches on here I could have done without, to be 100% honest with you. Number one, Thunder and Lightning versus Harlem Heat. I think Harlem Heat, to me, was one of those solid tag teams back in the, early 90s. You have Booker T, you have Stevie Ray, multi-time tag team champions. But this match they had against Thunder and Lightning didn't do them any justice whatsoever, man. Thunder and Lightning, I don't know who came up with that idea. Awful tag team. Completely awful tag team. And to be honest with you, I feel like Harlem Heat should have had a better spot on this pay-per-view card than going up against Thunder and Lightning, or be the second match on this card, or first match, if you will, officially on this card. The other match that I wasn't a big fan of was the Equalizer and Jim Steele. I don't know anything about Jim Steele personally. It was the first match I've ever seen Jim Steele in. I just thought it was an awful match. It goes hand in hand with the Equalizer as well. Again, man, very lackadaisical booking. Whoever booked this card, I don't know if it was Nick Bockwinkel at the time. It was a horrible booking idea. I know there's mid-card matches, don't get me wrong, but this match was just downright awful. And for Jim Steele's finish to be the Lou Thez press, that was a very lackadaisical finish to get the victory over Equalizer. It was just very lackadaisical, man. It was very lazy booking, and the finish was really lazy. One of the matches on here that I really did enjoy, though, was the television championship match between Arn Anderson and Steven Regal. I mentioned this a couple times in my other videos, man. Steven Regal is severely underrated as a professional wrestler. And a lot of people don't like his matches because, he's not really a high flyer, and so on and so forth. But Steven Regal is a, student of the game. And I've always respected his matches, throughout his entire career, whether it was in WCW and WWE. He's a student of the game. And to have this match against a guy like Arn Anderson, who, again, another, student of the game and is always willing to learn. And Arn Anderson put on fantastic matches. And I've seen this multiple times in the past about Arn Anderson as well. Arn Anderson should have been multi-time world champion. Just from the, athletic prowess that he had, the in-ring savvy that Arn Anderson had, and the fact that, unfortunately he wasn't multi-time world champion. It's kind of a shame, man. But at the same time, too, he was a world-renowned tag team, with Ole and Tully Blanchard, mainly Tully Blanchard. One of the founding members of the Four Horsemen. So it's not like Arn Anderson didn't get, his fair shake in professional wrestling. What I'm saying is Arn Anderson, for his ring prowess and his athletic ability, he could have been multi-time world champion just based on those things alone. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. But again, having both Arn Anderson and Steven Regal in the same ring, competing for the television championship, fantastic match. And honestly, probably the second best match on this card, in my honest opinion. And not only that, the television championship for WCW was severely underrated. I was a big fan of the television championship growing up, man. The 15-minute time limit, you put the best versus the best. And to be honest with you, I mean, it made for exciting matches because you didn't know who was going to come out the victory, get the victory in that match. And not only that, both competitors only had 15 minutes to win the match. So it was always, kind of a give or take thing. Arn Anderson definitely could have won this match, but unfortunately, Steven Regal ended up picking up the victory due to the help from Sir William. So again, it just shows you how strong at the time the WCW Television Championship really was, with guys like Regal and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, that held this title for WCW back in the day. But, and obviously the main event was another big matchup, having Ric Flair versus Vader, a big rivalry in WCW between Flair and Vader. And the way they were setting this up, it was like Vader was pretty much taking everybody out in the roster in WCW as far as injuring them, as far as Ron Simmons, even Flair for that matter. You know, a bunch of names that Vader went up against. You know, Vader was pretty much taking him out of WCW. So having Flair come in, you know, after a little bit of a layoff, you know, a comeback, if you will, and take on a guy like Vader. And Vader is no small guy at all, man. The guy is a complete unit. And, you know, again, I'm a big fan of Vader and Flair. But, you know, I will say this. There would never be another wrestler with the size and stature and the, you know, the wrestling ability that Vader had. I mean, for him to do a moonsault and the guy's pushing 400 pounds and can land on his feet if he missed his opponent, that's pretty impressive. You know, and there's not many guys, you know, with his size and stature that could do that, maybe besides Bam Bam Bigelow, which, again, is a severely underrated wrestler, underrated talent. I mean, the athletic ability that a guy like Bigelow or Vader, man, it's just absolutely insane. You got two guys well over 400 pounds probably that can move around in that ring like a light heavyweight. It's absolutely incredible, and it makes for a great match, man. Vader, you know, Vader had a really good career for himself in WCW, as well as made a big name for himself wrestling over in All Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, he made a huge name for himself, as well, you know, as also in New Japan. But the matches he had in All Japan Pro Wrestling, man, are absolutely legendary matches, especially the matches that he had with Cactus Jack over in Japan and Stan Hansen. I mean, those matches were legendary matches. And to be honest with you, some of the matches you'll never see again. But, again, man, the main event was awesome. And honestly, this card really was set up for the main event. This match, you know, it was all about the main event. And it kind of went back to when Flair first challenged Vader. You know, the entire night was kind of all about Flair going up against Vader. And this was kind of the same thing. You had Mean Gene Okerlund backstage, you know, trying to conduct an interview with Vader, and Vader's getting upset backstage. He's throwing chairs, telling Mean Gene that he wants no interviews. You got cops backstage, making sure that, you know, Vader and Flair were separated until the main event. That way nobody got injured before the match. So a lot of the SuperBrawl 1994 event was based around both Flair and Vader. I mean, even backstage you had Flair talking to Mean Gene, with Arn Anderson backstage with Flair, as well as Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, because the way they were setting this match up leading into Spring Stampede was that the winner between Flair and Vader, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, was going to challenge the winner of that match between Flair and Vader for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. So, you know, a lot of backstage stuff. You know, and Mean Gene's an absolute legend as well, man. Rest in peace to Mean Gene Okerlund. But, you know, a lot of this match was about the main event. A lot of this card was about the main event between Flair and Vader, and rightfully so, man. You know, two household names, two main eventers, and it was a really good matchup. As far as a rating for SuperBrawl 1994, man, I'm going to have to give SuperBrawl 1994 a solid rating of probably 4.5, maybe 5 at best. And to be honest with you, the reason why I'm giving it a 5, maybe a 5.5 at best for SuperBrawl 1994 is because of two matches. Arn Anderson versus Steven Regal for the television championship, and the main event between Ric Flair and Vader for the World Heavyweight Championship. That's the reason why I'm giving SuperBrawl 1994 a solid 5 at best. But this is my review of WCW SuperBrawl 1994. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.